important news, only verified facts. On Freedom, our time, with a roundup of the day's main events. Hello, my name's Mikhail Brand. Overnight Thursday, the Russian army attacked Ukraine, launching 119 strike drones. The defense forces shot down and jammed 99 drones using electronic warfare systems. Drone strikes were recorded at 11 locations, and debris fell at 4 more. One person was killed and 7 were injured as a result of the Russian army's attack on the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia. For the strike, Russian forces used about 10 aerial bombs and several missiles. 150 private homes were damaged or destroyed, cars in the yards were smashed, and power lines were torn down. Restoration work is underway. The aftermath of the attack is being dealt with by energy workers, rescuers, and volunteers. Also in the Zaporizhzhia region, the Russian army destroyed a postal operator's warehouse. The company notes that none of the employees were injured, but more than 150 packages were burned. Their value is estimated at 300,000 hryvnias. Russian occupiers continue to strike Kherson. The regional administration reported that today at noon, the Russian Federation Army attacked one of the city's central districts with a drone. 2 CHP workers were injured. The victims suffered shrapnel wounds, concussions, blast injuries, and closed head traumas. The women were hospitalized in moderate condition. Russian occupiers shelled one of the villages in the Chernihiv region this morning. A residential house and outbuildings were damaged. A fire also broke out. Rescuers quickly put out the fire, and there were no casualties. According to local authorities, over the past day, the Russian army attacked border settlements in the region 32 times. The Russians specifically targeted communication facilities with FPV drones. This morning, the Russian army attacked Pavlohrad in the Dnipropetrovsk region. A local enterprise was damaged. This was reported by the regional military administration. According to preliminary information, there were no casualties. There is especially high activity of Russian troops in the Pokrovsk direction. This was reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrskyi. He emphasized that just over the past week, Ukrainian defense forces repelled 260 attacks here. The Commander-in-Chief made another working trip to the area of responsibility of the 7th Rapid Response Air Assault Corps, where he discussed the details of the operational situation on the Pokrovsk bridgehead and commanders' proposals for increasing the effectiveness of combat operations. In total, 164 combat engagements were recorded on the front line over the past day. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the defense forces repelled 5 assaults by Russian occupiers, each in the Slavyansk and Pridneprovsk directions, 6 in the Lyman direction, 7 each in the southern Slobozhansk and Alexandrovsk directions, and 8 in the Kupiansk sector of the front. 3 bridgeheads remain hotspots. Thus, in the Holyaypol sector, Ukrainian troops repelled 18 Russian attacks, 20 in the Konstantinovka sector, and 32 in the Pokrovsk sector. As military experts note, today the main tool of the Ukrainian armed forces' defensive operations is counterattacking actions, and they are being used along the entire front line.
We have some good news from the Kharkiv front, southern Slobozhansky direction. Our defense forces are conducting counterattacks in the Slovyansk direction. The main goal is not just to recapture some positions, although tactically we understand that it's necessary to outplay the enemy here. The most important thing is to disrupt the enemy's plans for offensive actions, which they are now actively trying to demonstrate, starting from the Sumy region all the way to the Kherson direction. That's why it's clear that today, similar counterattacking actions by the defense forces are taking place on the Zaporizhzhia front. This really does disrupt the enemy's plans.
Ukraine is preparing a new meeting with the United States and is finalizing security guarantees. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy made this statement. The Ukrainian leader and government representatives are taking part in the Congress of Communities in Uzhhorod. Freedom correspondent Oleg Borisov is following the event. He is currently live with the studio. Oleg, good afternoon. Tell us more. What statements have already been made? What is known at this hour?
Miko, glad to have you here. Yes, the first stage of the Congress of Regional Councils and Communities with President Zelenskyy participating has ended. A lot of topics were actually raised, both domestic and international. Issues and problems were also voiced. They're present as well. Briefly, let's go over the key statements. First, Fuel. Right now, because of the situation in the Middle East, President Zelenskyy says the global situation is very difficult, but Ukraine is managing to overcome this crisis. Moreover, there are calculations showing that Ukraine can be supplied for a whole year and supplied with fuel, especially diesel fuel, which is very necessary for the social infrastructure and, of course, for defending the front lines. President Zelenskyy said that diesel fuel is now a priority for Ukraine and for its security policy. It's also important to note a crucial piece of information and an important statement. In addition to the topic of fuel, the issue of financing was also brought up for discussion. Specifically, the problematic loan of 90 billion euros that Ukraine still hasn't received due to strong political opposition from Hungary and Slovakia. But there's already a decision, and there are already developments indicating that the $52 billion needed to cover the state budget deficit will be provided. There are plans in place. In other words, President Zelenskyy reassured everyone, saying that financial stability for this year is secured and well thought out. In addition, of course, international issues were also discussed. At this point, we became more engaged in a face-to-face dialogue with President Zelenskyy. I managed to ask him a question regarding what I think was a scandalous statement by J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, about a piece of land. As he said, the negotiation process. J.D. Vance, let me remind you, said that there is progress in the negotiation process, but the issues revolve around a piece of Ukrainian land. I asked President Zelenskyy about his reaction, because no matter how you look at it, the piece of land that G.G. Vance is talking about is the size of the U.S. state of Kentucky, more than 100,000 square kilometers. I mean, the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Here's what President Zelenskyy responded. Let's hear it.
With all due respect, the Vice President does not participate in negotiations between the United States of America, Ukraine, and Russia. And I think that if he and other officials were involved, they would surely have a deeper understanding of what a small piece is versus what is actually Ukrainian territory, independent Ukrainian territory, which is important and, from a security standpoint, a priority, where there are strong defensive structures, fortifications, and where about 200,000 people currently live. And understanding that Russia's goal since the beginning of the occupation has always been the same, just in different forms or sequences. And that's why we understand what the occupation of the East really means. It's the opportunity to prepare a foothold, you could say, for future offensive actions.
Of course, the topic of the temporarily occupied territories and the front line was also discussed, where Russian occupiers are trying to seize Ukrainian land. We were talking about Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. Regarding this agglomeration, President Zelenskyy said that there is information indicating that the Russian military command has ordered the Russian occupying forces to capture Ukrainian territories, specifically the Pokrovsk agglomeration, by the end of April. To be precise about the deadline, April 25th. But President Zelenskyy said that he is fully aware of all the information. He sees exactly what real problems the Russians are facing on the front. And he stated, by the end of April, not only will the Russian occupiers fail, but it is physically impossible for them to capture any agglomerations, specifically in the context of Pokrovsk. And of course, President Zelenskyy, in his comments about the strikes, let me emphasize, the reciprocal strikes on the Russian Federation, said, and with your permission, I'll quote him directly, if you don't punch them in the face, they won't take us seriously. And quoting President Zelenskyy, there are definitely ways to punch him in the face. These are Ukrainian missiles, Ukrainian middle strike and deep strike drones. That's why there have been so many statements. We promptly publish all of them on our Freedom Telegram channel. So all the information is there for you. Mikhailo, now I'm handing it over to you from Uzhhorod to Kiev.
There's plenty of reason and plenty of ways to punch him in the face. Thank you, Oleg, for the detailed information. That was our correspondent Oleg Borisov, live with us. He talked about the Congress of Communities, which is currently taking place in Uzhhorod. As part of this event, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced that Ukraine is preparing a new meeting with the United States and is finalizing security guarantees. We'll discuss this topic in more detail with our guest a bit later. But for now, let's move on to other news of the day. Ukrainian strike drone operators hit a Tor-M1 surface-to-air missile system that Russian occupiers had deployed in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region. This was reported by Robert Madiar Brody, the commander of the drone systems forces. According to him, this is the 9th air defense system destroyed in 9 days in April. Evacuation continues from the frontline areas of Donetsk region. Every trip out of Drushkivka has now become life-threatening. Russian drones are literally hunting people and vehicles. How the police crews, known as the White Angels, evacuate civilians away from the war. More in our report.
We are heading to the city of Drushkivka. We're going to Drushkivka. We have a child there for evacuation, born in 2009. Another man with a second group disability and an elderly person.
Almost every day, White Angel crews travel to frontline settlements to evacuate to safer territory, those who were unable to leave on their own. In Drushkivka, Donetsk region, over 7,000 people still live under constant shelling. Most of them are elderly people. Spouses Valentina and Sergei are 72 years old. They lived in a private house. They say they didn't leave earlier because they had nowhere to put their animals. But when the shelling intensified, they realized it was dangerous to stay in the city any longer.
They're shooting. It's Scaly. Right there. Right there.
Every such trip for the White Angel police crew was a risk to their lives. Frontline territories are under the control of Russian FPV strike drones. Special detectors help to locate them.
Well, not over the road yet. Nothing in the field, over the tree eye.
What is this?
What do we have here? A wing from a Lancey, right? Yes.
Moving around the city's extremely dangerous, police say. Russian drones hunt for any vehicle. Therefore, during each evacuation, crews carefully work out the logistics considering the situation in the city. First, people are picked up from the most dangerous areas.
There's a religious concept, like the 7 circles of hell. There is such a concept as the 7 circles of hell. We've gone through 6 surveys. A drone hit the next street over. 2 days later, it hit the neighbors. Then there was another explosion. Our house was damaged. Then there were 2 more hits on the next street. And the 6th one hit our garden. It killed everything living. The trees were cut down as if with a ruler. This is our Scooby-Doo. This is our cat Sandy crying, and this is Diamond the chinchilla.
This family stayed in Drushkivka because of work, but they no longer dared to risk their lives and their children's.
Yeah, how are we bombing now? Well, supposedly they've started bombing harder again now.
It's been very hard in recent days. Shelling every day. And a 9-story building nearby was hit.
The White Angel police crews help not only people, but also animals. They bring humanitarian aid to shelters organized by local residents.
We stopped at an address and brought some from volunteers. Animal feed. There was a request. A local resident collects animals left in the city during evacuation.
The White Angels call such trips life flights. Therefore, despite the great risks, they are ready to go to frontline settlements to evacuate as many people as possible. Natalia Gusak for the Freedom TV channel.
And now, back to the main topic of the broadcast. Ukraine is ready for negotiations, but will not agree to concessions on Donbas. This was stated by Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The president noted that he is willing to meet with Putin, but not in Moscow or Kyiv, only on neutral ground. As an option, he suggested a diplomatic venue in the Middle East, Europe, or even the United States. At the same time, Zelenskyy rejected the Kremlin's demand to surrender Donetsk Oblast and emphasized that such a move would threaten the subsequent occupation of neighboring regions of Ukraine.
If we give Donbas to the Russians, they will occupy our best defended positions without any losses. Building new lines of fortifications could take a year to a year and a half. They could attack Kharkiv and other cities that make a significant contribution to our GDP, and society would become divided. And any division is a key goal for Putin and would undermine our independence. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine, in an interview with the Italian broadcaster RAI.